In this clip, I'm going to talk about different elements of culture and then talk about key concepts and terms in the study of culture. Let's begin with values. Values being, a non-material element of culture. These inform those who hold them of what is important, right, or just. By just, we mean fair. As we grow up within a culture, we learn what is important within that culture, the values that other people hold. We might come to accept or internalize many of these values such that these things become important to us. Now, with values, values can get tricky because there's not always a direct alignment between behavior and values. I can talk until I'm blue in the face, as the saying goes, about how much I value education, but I might be skipping classes and not doing my assignments. I can talk about how much I value my relationship with my wife, but I might be carrying on an extramarital affair. So values, the relationship between values and behavior can get complicated, but hopefully we are actually living out our values. Not everyone does, but hopefully we are. Beliefs refer to convictions or impressions of what is true. We hear beliefs, we might think of religion. Right? Some of our beliefs do come from a religion, and religion is an important part of culture. But not all of our beliefs come from religion. We have beliefs about the role of government. We have beliefs about the types of jobs that we find to be most desirable. Beliefs about when we should get married, when we should start a family. I should also mention that not all beliefs are true. Beliefs are simply our impressions of what is true. So you might have heard of urban legends, or you might have heard of myths. These fall under the umbrella of beliefs. Urban legends, myths, not necessarily true, but as we grow up within a culture, we might learn and come to accept certain urban legends or myths. So not all beliefs are true. Norms refer to common and accepted behaviors and attitudes. Now, of course, norms will vary from time to time and from place to place. The norms, say, of a library at 11:30 a.m. on a weekday are going to be quite different than the norms of a nightclub or dance club or rave at 11:30 p.m. on a Friday or Saturday night. Yes, norms do vary from time to time and place to place, but as we grow up within a culture and learn about our culture, we're going to learn the norms for different times and different places, different contexts, we might say. Symbols refer to anything that has meaning beyond its actual function or literal meaning. To kind of make that a little shorter and sweeter, symbols in sociology refer to anything that can be interpreted to have a meaning. We have religious symbols. Think of, the crucifix in Christianity, especially in Roman Catholicism. Think about the crescent and star, a symbol of the Ottoman Empire, which has come to be symbolic of Islam in many, not all, but many predominantly Muslim countries. Symbols for our favorite sports teams, their logos, for instance. As we grow up within a culture, we learn these symbols and we learn their meaning. Mores and folkways are both norms, so they both refer to common and accepted behaviors, but they're norms that vary in terms of how important it is to follow them. Mores are norms that are important to follow. If we violate a more, that means that we are violating a norm, and it's likely to cause harm to our reputation. It's likely to disrupt the social order. Suppose, for instance, I violate the more of coming to work on time, ready to work, with a good attitude, or at least not with a bad attitude. Suppose I violate that norm by showing up 2 hours late and being under the influence of alcohol. I show up drunk to work. Well, if I do that, people, my colleagues, they're probably going to be talking. They're going to be wondering, what's wrong with this guy? Does he have a drinking problem? What has gone wrong in his life? I will likely be subjected to some type of discipline. I might be suspended from my job. I might lose the job. I might lose the job unless I enter into a alcohol treatment program. So if I violate that norm, it's going to cause a negative effect upon my reputation, and I will likely be people might view me as an immoral person or a bad person, a unhealthy person. It's going to affect the way people see me. It's going to disrupt the social order. It's a big deal if I violate a more. Folkways, well, these are still norms, but if we violate them, eh, really no big deal. Folkways are norms that are considered to be nice or appropriate, but they're not enforced nearly as strictly as mores are. Suppose we are on campus walking into a building and I am 10 feet ahead of you as I walk into the building. It would be polite for me to hold the door open for you. If I don't do that, however, if I just walk in and let the door close behind me, well, it's not going to cause a disruption to the social order. Other people's, schedules, routines are not going to be affected. Probably not going to be a lot of people talking about it. Now, maybe you, 10 feet behind me, think, this guy's this guy might be in a hurry. Maybe he didn't see me. Maybe worst case scenario, you say, this guy's a little rude or inconsiderate. But that's probably all that's going to happen as a result from that. Yes, it's polite if I adhere to that norm of holding the door open for you, but if I don't, no big deal. Some of these norms, some of these values are quite common across multiple cultures. We call those cultural universals. Some might be, only prevalent within one or two or, a few different cultures. We would call those cultural particulars. So cultural universals refer to elements of culture that are found within numerous cultures throughout the world. Cultural particulars only found in a couple cultures. Let's go over some key concepts of culture here. Ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism refers to a way that people might interpret the elements of a non-native culture, a culture that they did not grow up in or do not have a lot of experience or familiarity with. If I have an ethnocentric point of view, or if I react ethnocentrically, I interpret the elements from, again, another non-native culture. I interpret them by kind of comparing them to the elements of my own culture. I basically judge the elements of another culture by the elements of my own culture, what is commonplace within my own culture. If I have a culturally relativistic point of view, I do not make that comparison to the elements of my own culture. I try to understand the elements from this other non-native culture by recognizing their significance, perhaps their history, their role within that other culture. So ethnocentrism is, yes, going to be a lot more judgmental. Cultural capital refers to basically one's know-how or one's acumen of different cultural elements. If I have cultural capital, well, I have, as you see, some non-economic assets. So we're not talking about money or stocks or bonds or anything like that. I have non-economic assets that can be valuable for me to achieve social mobility. Really what that means is can be valuable for me to do better in life. If I have knowledge of literature or knowledge of theater or knowledge of, say, how to repair a car or even how to change a tire on a car, those are things that can help me do better, can help me get jobs, can help me maybe get promoted in my job, can help me attract clients. Cultural capital refers to one's know-how, one's acumen, one's knowledge of different cultural elements. The more cultural capital we have, the better positioned we are to do well. High culture and pop culture. High culture refers to the elements of our culture that might not be accessible to everybody. Think about, attending plays on Broadway in New York City. Not everybody can afford to do that. Not everybody was raised with the appreciation of, say, that type of theater. Knowledge of, opera singers, for example. That would be high culture. Knowledge of pop culture would involve, uh, knowing about, which celebrities are dating, which celebrities. or knowledge about, say, Taylor Swift or Jason Momoa or Justin Bieber or Bad Bunny. We might know about these people even if we don't want to necessarily know about these people. Certain TV shows certainly that air on NBC or ABC or CBS, or TV shows that air on streaming services that are not that expensive. Pop culture is much more accessible. We don't need a lot of money. We don't need to have a high class. We don't need to come from a higher social class in order to be knowledgeable about pop culture. Cultural diffusion relates to how cultures might change. Cultures change as they get introduced to new cultural elements. Well, cultural diffusion refers to the spread of elements from one native culture to other non-native cultures. Diffusion means to spread. Something is diffused, it has spread out. When we talk about cultural diffusion, we might think of the spread of, say, Italian American food. Things like spaghetti and meatballs, things like lasagna, chicken parmesan, ravioli. Its origin in Italian American communities, in cities like New York and Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, St. Louis, Missouri. But now these Italian American dishes are very popular throughout the world, even among people who are not Italian or not Italian American. Think about the spread of K-pop music, Korean pop music, or another type of music, reggaeton or Latin trap music. These have their origins in one particular culture, but they've since spread out and become popular throughout numerous other cultures. Subcultures and countercultures. Subcultures belong to a larger mainstream culture, but they stand out because of certain cultural elements. Maybe the language that the subcultural group speaks, maybe the part of the world that they come from, maybe the religion that they practice, maybe the way they dress or the type of music they listen to, the things that they're interested in. Maybe they're really into sports. You might think of jocks, for example, as a subcultural group. Maybe theater kids or band kids. You might think of them as a subcultural group. They stand out because of a certain interest that they have or language that they speak or some cultural element. Countercultures, on the other hand, well, they defy or go against elements of the mainstream culture. The prefix counter means opposite to or to go against. Countercultures believe that something in the mainstream culture is a corrupting influence. They don't want to be a part of it. They don't want to fit in. They don't want to be accepted. They don't want to get along. So unlike subcultures, which are a part of the mainstream culture, they get along with, or at the very least tolerate, other cultural groups or other subcultures. Countercultures don't have any interest in doing that. They often seek to separate themselves, or they seek to challenge elements of the mainstream culture. Countercultures go against something that is going on within the mainstream or popular culture. Dominant ideologies refer to very common ways of thinking within a certain culture. In the United States, we have a dominant ideology kind of associated with the American dream. We often call it that if you work hard and play by the rules, you can be successful. Right? If we work hard, we do what we're supposed to do, we can achieve a better life for ourselves or maybe for our future generations. A lot of people believe in that. But when we start to learn or start to realize that certain groups might have a harder time being successful, maybe because of institutional discrimination, because of various barriers they face, well, certain people might not like to hear that. In recent years, there's been controversy about what we call DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some parents don't necessarily want their children learning that America might not be meritocratic for everybody. Certain groups have a harder time achieving than others do. Culture wars, therefore, exist when these dominant ideologies are challenged. When one particular cultural group feels that their cultural elements, their beliefs, their values, their norms, their important symbols are being challenged by some other group. Lastly, culture lag and culture shock. When new technologies or new elements are introduced to a culture, sometimes it takes the culture time to adapt. Our norms, our values, our beliefs need to adapt. Culture lag occurs when people fall a little bit behind. They don't have the knowledge of all the elements of a culture. Perhaps they were incarcerated, perhaps they're elderly and haven't learned.